Jocelyn Silva is an empowerment coach, a sex educator, a life and intimacy mentor who helps individuals and couples heal sexual shame, reclaim pleasure, and build deeply connected, authentic relationships. Born and raised in the San Fernando Valley and now a digital nomad, currently based in Mexico, she brings over 13 years of experience, a master's in social work and a background in somatic healing to her coaching, courses and group programs, guiding clients to feel confident, desired, and fully at home in their bodies and intimate lives. Thank you so much for joining today. You're very kind to spend some time with us.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Jocelyn had to tell me to hit record because I was already getting into it while we were talking. So thank you for keeping me on track. Just to take you back a little bit. So you shared in your biography and details about you that you grew up as a Catholic schoolgirl who you once wanted to be a nun. And I wonder what your earliest messages about sex and desires felt like and sounded like, and how did they shape the sense of what was allowed for you at that sort of teenage age?
Yeah. By the way, before we get into that, I want to say every time I meet people from England, I always love to give this little tip. People aren't aware of this, but did you know there's a really big community of Mexican people in Los Angeles that are obsessed with Morrissey and the Smiths?
My daughter will be thrilled to hear that. She's obsessed equally with Morrissey and the Smiths.
So my first tattoo I ever got was in Manchester because I'm one of those people. I actually came out in a documentary about like Morrissey and the Smiths. So anyways, I always love to tell English people that just because it's such a random thing.
It is.
And I always feel connected to English culture because I'm such a big Morrissey fan. So fun fact.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So so growing up Catholic, my mother was so anti-sex. Like the thing, like now I understand it, right, as an adult, but my mom just had so much trauma and so much fear of me ever getting hurt and wanted to protect me so much that she really. And so the messages that I received was that sex is bad, it's a sin. If you do it before you're married, it's awful, like you're gonna get pregnant. And so I always thought that just sex was like this deep, dark, disgusting thing that no one should ever touch, right? And it wasn't until I had sex for the first time that I realized, wow, I have been lied. Those messages were really intense. And it took a lot of amount of effort to really unlearn as I entered, my college years.
It's really interesting as a parent, you sort of think about this, but all the research shows that telling your children how terrible and bad and heinous and disgusting drugs, sex, alcohol are literally is a surefire way that child's going to be indulging in sex, drugs, rock and roll as soon as they can. And you wonder why we haven't really learned that actually explaining and exploring the topic is far more beneficial than actually, just straight out saying it's dirty and it's wrong and it's sinful and you go to hell. And I wonder, do you think are we getting better? Do you think?
Oh no, I think we're in the States as a pedophile who isn't in jail yet. So no, we're getting, which is why for me it's so important to go on these podcasts and to have these conversations, because we need one now more than ever to really understand the importance. And I also just want to explain, I don't think it's getting better. I think in some ways it is. We have social media now. Generation has access to the internet. They can Google anything. They can ask ChatGPT anything. Reddit is a wealth of knowledge and support and guidance as well. So there's a lot of things that exist now that did not exist when I was younger. However, I think that the larger conversation around sex and sexuality is not improving. We're actually saying that clinics are being controlled. Is being more and more inaccessible. Abortion services are becoming more and more inaccessible. And really, you were touching on a topic that I always like to discuss when you were saying, so I believe that if we all had less shame, we'd just be
Mm.
generally more. I say to that is that the fact that we have shame is not an accident. The powers that be know that the way that we become empowered individuals is through can control our ability to make money, and if they can control it, we become easily manipulate. We become easy, and the masses become disempowered, which is essentially what the powers that be want, right? So none of this is negative society, which is why it's so important for us to go on this journey to break apart from this so that sexually liberated, but mentally and emotionally and physically in all aspects of our lives. And sex is just kind of.
Mm. No, I totally agree. And I had this sort of, was it an argument? It was a disagreement with somebody a few weeks ago, and I was trying to explain that I felt that the aim of government, in a way, is to control its subjects, its voters, whatever. So if somebody's controlled, you can get them to do what they want, and you can do things without them sort of challenging or thinking, oh, they say, no, that isn't what it's about. They're not trying to do that. And I couldn't get past the fact that, to try and explain as clearly as you just have, how important it is that we have our own sovereignty over our bodies, our minds, our actions. And I do think, yeah, there's so many legal barriers, so many societal barriers, so many moral barriers that are put in our way. I just hope things will get better. And it does give me hope, where there are pockets of the world, there are great people like you out there that sort of communicate the message. One thing you said earlier, and it's not to challenge what you said, and I agree in some ways, but young people today do have access to so much information about intimacy and sex. They can access porn that I couldn't have dreamed of when I was sort of 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 25, 30, whatever. Just things that I can't get my head around. So where's that? What's he doing? There's almost this fire hose of information coming at people. I think one of the challenges is how do people, individuals, young people, discriminate between what's accurate and helpful and what's not. And I just wondered, what your thoughts might be on that.
So before I get into that, I do want to say, even though I believe things are getting worse in regards to sexual empowerment and individuals having access to sex education, I also believe that they will get better, because just like every cycle of life, in nature, cycle of nature, there needs to be a rupture in order for there to, and I see that the world right now is in so much rupture, which is awful and terrible and challenging, but it also means that a beautiful repair and a beautiful direction change is on the horizon. And I know for a fact that at one point people are going to start to wake up, and the pendulum will swing the other way, right? Where we'll kind of open our eyes a little bit more, because that's what's happening right now. There's a huge awakening. And I think that awakening is going to support individuals in understanding, like, oh, okay, like, what do I need to do, like you said, to become more sovereign, to reject the ideologies that the powers that be are giving us. So I do believe that eventually things will get better. Just things are not really great right now, right? But anyways, so yeah, it's interesting because I did not mention porn. When I said they have access to information, I think I said Reddit, social media, right? But it's important that you mentioned that, because you're right. They also have access to pornography, right? How do you see? It's funny, right? Because they say, okay, well, how do they understand what is good media, or media that is like supportive, educational, and will guide them toward that isn't? I mean, a lot of that has to do with parenting, right? Teaching them that. Unfortunately, not a lot of parents are doing that. So for a lot of young kids, the challenge of today's world. It's also, pornography is not real sex. It's Hollywood, right? It's movie making and as an educational tool. Sometimes it can be, but the problem with that is when you have so much access to dopamine, especially that type of dopamine as a child,
Mm.
it becomes very challenging for young people to learn appropriate emotional regulation, turn to the distractions to support them in whatever they're experiencing in life.
Mm. Yeah, I've been lucky enough to speak to quite a few people in the adult content creation, the porn industry, and all of them, from sort of actors, actresses, directors, etc. They all say what you said, that we really don't want people to see it as education. We just want it to be entertainment. In the same way that I might watch a John Wick film, that doesn't mean I should go out and shoot 100 people. It's not real. It's in the same way it's entertainment. It's, if that's your thing, you want to watch that, you want to watch something else. Don't think of it as a guide to your life. It's just an entertaining hour and a half. Or in porn, it's a sort of 3 or 4 minute clip. And I'm not against porn. There are some great feminist porn makers. There are some great porn that's made very consciously, very holistically. It's just that we seem to have this sort of almost fast food approach to it with the clip sites that don't talk about consent or awareness or those sort of things, and it can give a very false perception of, as you said, it's not what sex really is. It's not what intimacy is all about. It's something quite different. So how did you go? Just going back a little bit again. So how did you go from quite a repressed view of sex when you were younger to having sex, thinking, "Hey, I'm not burning in hell. That was actually all right," to deciding to study sexuality and become a leader in a sort of sexual awareness and sexual knowledge space? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I've always been a very horny person. I mean, I can remember being as young, just being a very young child and always legs, right? And then being told it's bad, it's wrong, and just like, being so and so when I was 16 years old, I had a boyfriend. He wanted to be a priest. I wanted to be a nun. It was we would do this weird thing where we'd be like, okay, we're going to do sexy things, but we need to this week. We need to do a sacrifice, which means we were not going to talk to each other for a day to give it as a sacrifice to God. We are going to confession so that we can confess the sin, and then we should be good. We literally would have that conversation before engaging in sexy things, and then engage in sexy things, and then do all the things so that we can be absolved of the sin. I mean, talk about fucking 16 years old. It's the time where I should. Yeah, it should be the time where I should just be consequent, but no, I was scared shitless of God's wrath. So when I was 18, my second boyfriend, and that was the first time I quote unquote went all the way. And he was amazing. He was gentle and sweet and kind. He lit incense and candles and played Bauhaus. And it was, it's my first time, but the experience was so beautiful. And I just remember thinking, who the hell said this is bad? This isn't bad. This is amazing. And then the sex got better, and I was like, holy shit, this is fucking awesome. Who the fuck said something? And then I just became angry, so pissed that I was lied to my whole life, that I was made to believe that sex was bad, and all these things, when here I had this man, well, he was 19, who just loved me and treated me so well and wanted so much for us to have just a fun sex life. He really just did open my world. And so that's when I went on the journey where I just became angry. In college, I became part of the feminist club and the students first courses, and I learned about feminism, and I learned about the sexual revolution, and I just was like enthralled, and I just got so angry at the church. I left the Catholic Church. I said, fuck this. I don't want anything to do with this. And I went on my journey. And then when I was 20 years old, I became a sex educator with a collective in Los Angeles called Coochie, LA. And we did comprehensive sexual educational workshops for low income communities. It just expanded my knowledge and my world. And that's when I said, oh my God, I want to help other people become sexually empowered as well and get rid of their shame and feel good in their bodies. And then a bunch of other things happened after that, but that was essentially the turning point.
I'm glad the first experience was a positive one. And like I say, it wasn't necessarily mind-blowing sex, but it was the fact that you felt safe and you felt seen and you felt held in the space you're in. So yeah, kudos to that guy for doing that. Not a lot of guys.
Yeah, he's lovely. Mm-hmm.
So did the first guy you were with, did he become a priest?
No, about him, but I'm sure he didn't.
No nuns, no priests. Okay. One of the things let me know what you think about this. One of the things I sort of learned to believe over the course of the last few years is that one of the challenges we have is how we define sex.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of heterosexual couples, they see sex as penis in vagina, orgasm. That's how they perceive sex to be. And so if we don't have sex, then we don't have anything really. And for younger people, for older people, our bodies change, our abilities change, our desires change, all this. So I always think if we could almost replace the word in our minds, sex, with pleasure, things would be a lot better. And if you thought about having holding somebody, stroking somebody, massage, mutual masturbation, whatever, and reframe all of that as being pleasure, that sort of very goal-oriented sex that we sort of learn when we're teenagers would feel a lot less important. Yeah, and I just wondered whether it resonated or if you thought that was completely wrong.
I don't know if you could see, but I literally have a tattoo that says pleasure right here.
I didn't see that before.
Yeah, 100% it resonates because I mean that's a really great actually I've never heard it being said in that way, like replacing the word sex with pleasure, and I think that's absolutely phenomenal, right? Because so many of us just have like, yeah, you're right, like the idea of like penis goes in vagina, there's an orgasm, right? So then when any part of that goes wrong, it's all hell breaks loose, right? The penis can't get hard. Oh no, something terrible is happening. Someone can't have an orgasm. Oh no, like the whole world's falling apart, right? But if we look at pleasure, there's so many ways that you can experience pleasure. I mean, people don't even realize there are 14 different types of ways we can experience orgasms, and they're not all through the genitalia, which is incredible, right? So yeah, I think that 100% resonates. And just like we need to build our distress tolerance so that we can learn how to have healthy, open, and honest conversations, I also think we need to build our pleasure tolerance, because I think many of us are so uncomfortable with experiencing joy and pleasure. And it in learning, how can I be receptive to joy? How can I be receptive to pleasure and trust that I deserve it, right?
Yeah, and I think that stems from, as you were saying, when you were younger, you were fascinated by what was between your legs, as all boys are. Our hands are always down our shorts and our pants, and your hands get slapped away, and I think for a lot of people, we never learn or create a self-pleasure practice to know what we actually enjoy. And then as you're with somebody else, you're almost thinking, well, surely you're a mind reader. Surely you know what I enjoy. When you haven't really figured it out for yourself, I think that's one of the big challenges where we're sort of, our hands are slapped away, we're told it's dirty, told it's sinful, etc. So we never spend an hour or 2 hours with our own bodies in peace and then in a safe space where we can actually, indulge ourselves and then experience that in a relationship.
100%. Yeah, that's the bulk of what I do in my work is help couples navigate that.
Because one of the things I know you focus on, which I really like the way it was worded, so you help people go from performing sex, almost like you're following a script from a play, to truly feeling. And I wonder how people can recognize if they're in performance mode, even if they think they're having good sex.
Yeah, that's a great. Well, put it this way, if people are coming to me, they know they're not having good sex.
Yes, they're not coming to you to say, hey,
Yeah.
I just want to tell you everything's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. So there needs to be an awareness that there is some sort of disconnect that's happening, right? And then once you get to that awareness, that's when we uncover, oh, you're not actually feeling you're performing, right? So for men, it's very, very obvious, right? The performance comes in a very obvious way. Their penis gets an erection, right?
Mhm.
And when there is a lack of an erection, there can be so many just like feelings that come up and so many men that get so hard on themselves, right? And that's really when they're leaning into that performance, right? It's like, man, I'm like, I can't perform and I can't please my partner and what's wrong with me? And instead of being like, why don't you just enjoy what's happening? Why don't you just enjoy the sensations, even on like a flaccid penis? Like, why is there so much shame around that, right? So in men, it comes out very obviously. And it's a little more challenging because there is no obvious presentation of whether or not they can perform, right?
Mhm.
Like it's a lot less nuanced. I'm sorry, it's a lot more nuanced than men. So for a lot of individuals, it shows up in disinterest in sex. So they'll usually
Mhm.
say things like, "Oh, I have a very low libido. I have no interest in sex. It's not something that I want," right? And what I find is that, yes, there are cases where women's hormones fluctuate, maybe they're on medication. There are physiological reasons for those phenomenons. But what I find a lot is that it's not that there's something that's happening that's making them disinterested in, or like that's making their libido low. It's that they're just not having sex worth having. And so once they realize I'm not interested in sex because I don't like the sex that I'm having, but I don't know what I like and I don't know how to even ask for what I desire. So guess what? I'm never going to get it, right? Then
Yeah.
you run into this loop because you think that something's wrong with you. And so, and that's pretty much when you know, like, okay, I think I am engaging in performative sex because I'm doing it to appease my partner, to make them
Yeah.
happy, so they could shut up and leave me alone for another week or two before we have to do it again, right?
Mhm.
Instead of being
Mm.
genuinely excited to be like, oh, I can't wait to indulge in all of the pleasure that I know is about to come my way.
So do you get people coming to you that, well, they might even say it, but they present in a way that they feel that they're somehow broken or
Yeah.
something's wrong with them, and because those are two terrible things to feel. There's nothing wrong with anybody. Nobody's broken. How do you, yeah, how do you help them get past those emotions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, I get many people that say there's something wrong with me again, right?
Hmm.
Well, first I tell them they're not because that's true. They're not broken. But here's the thing. A really big part of the reason why we feel so disconnected from our erotic energy, our eroticism, is because we're generally disconnected with ourselves. What I come to find in people that say, I think there's something wrong with me, I feel broken, is that there are other things at play that are going on. So whether they don't feel emotionally safe with their partner and they're thinking, why can't I just have sex? Well, it's because maybe you're not in the most safe relationship. Maybe your partner doesn't validate your feelings, make you feel like you can fully relax, right? People don't
Mhm.
understand is that your body needs to be in a full state of relaxation in order for it to be receptive to sexual intimacy. If you feel tension, if you feel anxiety, right, your body will not open up in the way that it would if it's completely relaxed. Your body needs to be in the parasympathetic state, right? That's where your nervous system is. So when people say, I think there's something wrong with me, I think I'm something broken, usually what I notice is a few things. One, they're probably in a state of high stress, high anxiety all the time, and they don't even realize it, right? Two, they just have a huge lack of knowledge. So it's like, how are you supposed to know if you don't know, right? And then 3, they don't act upon the things that they know will get them to where they want to go, right? So it's almost like, think about if someone's trying to lose weight and they eat a salad once and then they say, I think I'm broken, something's wrong with me. I had a salad yesterday and I still weigh 500 pounds or whatever, right? Well, you would look at them and say, you're broken, you're just clearly lacking knowledge, clearly lacking some sort of emotional regulation tool, right? And clearly you're probably lacking a clear path on how to get to your goal, right? It's the same thing with
Mhm.
sex and intimacy. It's those same things. And so I find that with my clients, that when we start to understand, okay, what does emotional safety look like and how do you achieve it, whether it be through meditation, journaling, having intimate and close conversations with your partner, right? Whatever it may be that works for them. How do we get to a state of emotional safety? Okay, great. Let's talk about knowledge. Do you know all the parts of your own genitalia? Do you know what parts feel really good for you? Do you know the positions that you enjoy? Do you know what turns you on? Do you know what your boundaries are? So we do that self-exploration work. So then they finally, their eyes are open and they're like, oh, I'm not broken. I just don't like having sex at night because at night I'm exhausted because I'm taking care of the kids all day. The best time for me to have sex is actually in the afternoon. Literally, once you have that knowledge and then you're able to act upon it, it just changes your world, right? So it's developing the knowledge. And then from there is where you can, as I say, to act upon the knowledge that you've gained. And then once I take a journey, things just start working. Things just start clicking.
That was really good. That makes complete sense.
Thank you.
What I'm going to say now, it might be completely wrong, and forgive my ignorance. But when you're talking to heterosexual men, heterosexual women, and they come to talk to you, and they have is there any truth in the fact that men see sex as a way to create an emotional connection, whereas women crave an emotional connection in order to desire sex? Is there any truth in the way men and women view sex and intimacy being quite different?
I don't believe that generalizing large amounts, generalizations I don't think are good because there's nuance. There's always nuance that exists. Okay, so I want to say that first, right? Can't say all men are like this and all women are like that because that's
No,
not
no,
true.
no.
There's a lot of men that need
Mhm.
emotional safety before they get into sexual intimacy, and there's a lot of women that don't really need that as much, right? Okay, great. I will say this. Men are socially conditioned to be emotionless sexual beings. Women are socially conditioned to being emotional sexless beings. So when these two types of individuals come together, it creates conflict,
Yes.
right? Because one needs the sex in order to feel emotionally connected, the other one needs the emotion to feel sexually connected, right?
Mm.
And so that's really when men and women get to navigate their social conditionings and understand, okay, how, like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Well, it's like, I need to feel safe with you to have sex. Okay, how do I develop that safety? Well, I need to have sex with you to feel safe. Okay, well, how do I develop the safety the safety to feel comfortable enough to have sex so that we can then get into that emotional connection, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, that just takes a lot of inner work, going to
Mhm.
therapy, going to coaching, having lessons, and also a great amount of awareness of like who we are as people and what the world has told us about who we need to be, depending on what race or gender we are.
Mm. And do you find that people have a relationship with a partner of the same gender? Do you find that they tend to, again, it's generalizing, isn't it? But so you talked about women are taught to be sort of sexless, etc., and men are taught to be sexual, etc. So if you have two men together or two women together, how does that dynamic work? Or do you find that's just a very different emotional connection?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so I am bisexual, and
Mhm.
I definitely have found that are not men. There is a very high amount of emotional intelligence and attunement, right, that I have experienced in those relationships. And I oftentimes have to teach them how to be emotionally attuned. That's just my
Yeah.
personal experience,
Yeah.
right? And when it comes to two men, I mean, what I see a lot when it comes, a lot of gay men are impacted and affected by the larger gay culture, right? The larger gay culture is very like hookup oriented and
Yeah.
open and over sexualized because
Mhm.
of how conditioned men are to be overly, not to be super emotional. But that is definitely a challenge that a lot of gay men have echoed, saying, sure, this is what they, this individual would like a deep emotional connection. I want monogamy. I want the family, right? So I
Mm.
would say that it's probably a little more challenging to find possible, because, and this is why I don't like to do the
Yeah,
generalizations,
yeah.
because there are, like I said, they're emotionally attuned and many women actually attuned, right? It's just kind of understanding how those the conditioning plays a role in our relationships and learning how to unlearn them in the dynamic.
Mhm. It's really interesting how so much of what you've said and shared is almost has been created or formed or certainly influenced by society, but almost by what we believe to be, and these are terrible words to use, almost informed to be the way that we should feel and what the right way to do things is, and that's a real challenge, isn't it? If you whatever society you're brought up in, if you're growing up as a sort of first generation Mexican American, and you get people that are growing up in parts of the UK, people growing up in Sweden, people growing up in Angola, people growing up in India, all of which have different cultural understandings of what intimacy is all about. But that's what initially, at the very least, drives what our understanding is of how we should feel and what the right things to do are. So how do you almost help people break away from that societal hold, if that makes sense?
How do I help people break away from that societal hold?
Because if they've always been taught a certain way to think, or always believe that they should always have an orgasm, that they should sort of lay back and think of England, or they should behave in a certain way, and you're actually sort of hopefully trying to explore with them and say, well, no, there is a very, very different way of believing,
Mhm.
trusting, feeling about
So
yourself.
I find that a lot of individuals that have these beliefs of us,
Mhm.
these beliefs are floating in our brains, and we know that we have them, we know that they're there, we know that they're the life that we truly desire. We just don't know how to change. It is
Yes.
a cognitive behavioral activity that I coaching called thoughts, feelings, actions. And it pretty much
Mhm.
says that how it goes is that all human feelings and our actions, right? We have a thought, it's an action, and that's how we behave. The behaviors turn into habits, the habits turn into our identities, right? So when I have them tell me what the thoughts that they have or the limiting beliefs that they have around sex are, a chart. So they get to see all of their fucked up beliefs on very powerful. And I get to ask them, okay, how does this make you feel when you tell people angry, upset, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And when you think 90, we'll say 90% of the time, the action, do you want to take a guess what it is?
No, I'll get it wrong.
Yeah. Okay. 90% of the time. 90%
Okay.
of the time, it'll say, it makes me want to run away. It makes me want to do nothing. It makes me want to avoid, it makes me want to not initiate. It makes me, and then you realize, well,
Mm.
no wonder you're not going to where you want to go, because these thoughts are stopping you. So then what we do is we say, okay, we've thrown up all your fucked up beliefs. How do we change them, right? So let's go ahead and go through the process of changing them. So let's say one of the beliefs that they have is sex is a sin, right? Okay, let's change that to something that's more empowering. So sex is a beautiful activity that I do with my partner to show them that I love them, right? And then, okay, how does that make you feel when you think that? It makes me feel empowered, confident, safe, happy, etc. Okay, and what does that make you want to do? And then they'll notice, oh, it makes me want to have sex. It makes me want to engage with my partner. It makes me want to feel connected, right? So a lot of it is really understanding, what are the thoughts? How can we start changing the thoughts so we can start changing the feelings attached to those thoughts, so we could start changing the actions, and then ultimately change the results of your life.
I can completely understand how the natural response to so many things is to do nothing, is not to take any action. There was a film a few years ago about a comet that was going to destroy the Earth with Leonardo DiCaprio and a few of the famous actors, and they went to the White House and said, "Look, this comet's going to destroy the Earth in like 2 days. I should do something about it." And the president's response was, "Right, what we're going to do is sit tight and assess." So basically, do nothing. And exactly as you said, it's actually, yeah. Well, if we don't do anything, things can't get worse. But actually, they can, because inaction can lead to lots of terrible things happening. And I did want to ask you, and you said before about when we talked about sex and pleasure, that sometimes people's desire, people's hormone levels, men's ability to have an erection, maintain an erection, menopause, perimenopause, lots of things happen to our bodies, both emotionally and physically over the course of a relationship. And I wondered how. So I'm at that age now where my erections, they're not the same as they were when I was 20. I can't walk around sort of hanging a towel off it and stay hard for hours. My wife's going through perimenopause, menopause, so the sort of sex that we have when we're 20-25 is very different, and so it should be. But there is that challenge where we've almost have that narrative of, but that's what sex is. That thing that we've been doing for the last X number of years. That's what sex. How do you perhaps help couples that are in that sort of space recognize that actually? Let me reframe that. So how do you almost help couples create a safe space to have that conversation? Because it's not. A lot of couples don't often sit and talk about how the sex they had last week was, whether they liked it or didn't like it, what they want to do differently. Because what we want and desire over a course of 5, 10, 20, 30 years, it changes. But it might be that thing, but you liked it last time. And then you sort of you might be in the middle of having sex and you sort of it's the worst time to say anything. I've never liked it when you did that. So, what? I've never enjoyed that. Oh my God, you feel so terrible. You feel there's something you've done wrong. So yeah, so I just wondered, not asking for free advice, but how do you help couples create that safe space for that conversation?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to note that if a couple has mutually decided to seek support, they are ready. They're ready to be coached, they're ready to learn,
Yep.
they're ready to change, right? This is why, in the beginning of my coaching, I had business coaches advise me to cold DM people. And I did that for like 2 seconds. And then I was like, this is stupid, because I can't tell someone, hey, do you need help with sex
Ready.
appeal? People need to go on their own journey. And then they come at a crossroads where they say things aren't worked, something needs to change, we need help, right? So I know that the couples that come to me, they're ready. They're ready to change, they're ready to learn, they're ready to go, right? And you're right, the majority of the couples I work with don't talk about sex. Create a safe space is by moderating and mediating conversations, right? This activity called Speak Your Desires, which is a free workbook. I'm actually turning into a course right now. And it's from A to Z of a sexual experience so that you can learn how to speak exactly. And then I have my couples face each other, do some eye gaze, walk them through that entire conversation. Incredible the things that come out of those conversations. That I create the safe environment is by literally teaching them, giving them a script and saying, follow the script and you're going to uncover a lot. And they do, and they're just like, whoa, like we've never shared detail before, right? And that's when I say, well, this is what we need to do. Like I always say, sex is a playground. And if you don't know what are, it's going to feel very confusing and stress inducing to play in that playground. But through the process of open communication, you start to understand what the parameters are. And once the parameters become more clear, you go into the playground and you run wild because you know where it starts and where it begins.
And is that the same process if there's been a particular, what's the right way to put it, activity? If there's been a particular sexual experience I wanted fun, and I might have been thinking about it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I've got it all planned in my head. I know what it feels like. I know what I want. I know. And again, the worst thing to do is to blurt that out, because the last thing you want is your partner to either run away thinking, "My God, you're a pervert," or "Oh, no, I can never think of that." Is that the same? Is that the same almost space that you need somewhere where you can talk about things without fear of being judged?
100%. Yeah. And it's the work is for both individuals. The work is in the individual that is expressing and in the individual that is receiving, right? For the individual expressing, it's how do I lean into my authenticity so that I can express myself openly and honestly. And then for the person receiving, it's how do I build distress tolerance so that I can sit in the feeling of discomfort while I listen to my partner and what they want. And that might not be what I want, right? So developing that distress tolerance and also developing the ability to be kind to your partner when they're being, so open and vulnerable with you, right? And that whole thing is like I said, a whole process in and of itself. And a lot of couples, the reason why they're so scared of this process is because they finally realize, like, fuck, what if I'm super honest and our relationship can't survive it? So what I earlier the better in a relationship. The earlier the better, because if you're incompatible sexually, you can figure that out early on, and then you won't have to waste 20 years feeling so sexually incompatible, right? And I always say, if these conversations lead to an agreement that you are sexually incompatible and that maybe it's not a good idea to be together, well, but if that's what happens, that's always going to be into be in a relationship where you're miserable because you're not getting what you desire.
Absolutely. It's funny, it's going back to something you said at the beginning about how governments, and we both sort of said about controlling our sexuality through shame and controlling our ability to make money, etc. So almost two important things in a relationship tend to be money and finance and sex and intimacy. They tend to be things we don't talk about. It's so crazy. Now, so many of my friends don't know how much each other earn, or they don't know how much debt one partner has, another partner has. They don't know that all. And again, the same. I'm sure the same thing will be sexual as well. Those things that are real. We talk about, I don't know, what do you want for dinner, but we don't talk about the things that are really meaningful. It's funny, isn't it? How we've maybe it's because we're not taught to talk about those things at school or as young people, really. But it just struck me as odd that we tend to shy away from those important conversations.
They're vulnerable. They're very vulnerable. That vulnerability can be very scary to people.
Yeah, and it's back to the inaction, isn't it? If I don't do anything, then things will stay as they are. But then inaction is rarely is really a precursor to things staying the same. Inaction is probably one of the biggest causes for things changing that you can imagine, really. So we talked at the beginning, you're now living in Mexico and have been there for a good few months now. I wonder, do you find that different geographies, different locations, do they influence your intimacy with yourself and your relationships? Does this place you're at physically have an influence on how you feel emotionally?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if it's directly connected to the space, but I feel like it's just a very interesting place to be. There's so many different energies, so much. There's a higher elevated spirituality, and that has definitely kind of like the journey I've embarked on recently because of that is I've realized that like I am craving a lot more intimacy. I'm craving true partnership right now in my life, which is something that I hadn't wanted for a while. Going on this journey of like, I want it to be exactly on it, or I want nothing. And like, I'm okay with that. And that's been really beautiful and interesting. But yeah, I find that different places I've traveled to, like when I lived in Spain, I was in Turkey, it does inform you because the culture is different, right? The culture is different. You're in a different place of your life. And if you're a single person, that can intimacy then can look very different with how you interact with the culture and where you are in life.
Do you think you're, and these are the wrong words, but hopefully you understand the meaning. Are you at a place where you're fully in tune with your own intimacy in your intimate life? Are there still edges or things you still want to do further exploration of to truly understand yourself?
I grow more deeply in my understanding of myself as every day goes on. And I don't think that journey will ever end. But lately, I think especially lately, I have just been astonished by how much I've learned about myself and how much I continue to learn about myself. And the exploration journey literally never ends. I'm constantly learning new things. And we go through new phases and we go through, different phases in life. But yeah, it's always learning, always learning.
And you sort of said throughout the podcast and at the beginning as well that we're going through a challenging phase in many countries. We have some challenging political beliefs that are currently in vogue and the narrative of governments. Is it almost at that time where things are perhaps feel the darkest in some ways that we are exploring and looking to really understand, well, many people looking to really understand themselves more? Because what I'm thinking is if things are generally okay and the government's fine, it's not getting in the way, it's not ruining our lives, etc., whether there's sort of less impetus to really explore more deeply. I mean, I've talked to lots of people in the spiritual community and the astrological community and people that have identify as a priestess, etc. They're saying there's much more of a feeling in those sort of communities that now is the time to really explore and make the change with the knowledge that we're growing about ourselves.
100%. Well, you have to understand everything that has been popularized by purposefully placed to disconnect us from ourselves. Social media, there is right?
Yeah.
Like the way that we scroll for hours and access from ourselves. ChatGPT disconnects us from our intuition. We're constantly on AI now, don't trust that we have within ourselves, right? So 100% now more than ever, it's important to connect with ourselves, like you said, to become a more sovereign person. Because with AI and Coochie, it's just disconnecting us further and further and further away from ourselves. And that disconnection can lead to confusion, stress, anxiety, depression, and all of those other things that we don't want.
Two more questions. And you've already sort of intimated an answer to this one, I guess, that people generally don't come to you to say, hey, I just wanted to sort of catch up, Jocelyn, and tell you how amazing my sex life is. I just wanted to sort of tell you how wonderful things are in my relationship. They're generally coming to you when they perhaps have some difficulties, maybe sadly even some trauma, some real challenges. And that can be really hard to sit with and to absorb. And I wonder, how do you protect your own nervous system and sort of nurture your own mental well-being in that situation?
Well, I'm not a therapist, so I don't process trauma deeply with my clients. That's not something that I do. If I feel like my clients need to process trauma more deeply, then I send them to a therapist. I have a list of referrals.
Yeah. But still, when people come to you with difficulties, or even when you're sort of going through the conversations, holding space with people, you're very much putting your mental energy into the conversation. I just wonder, how do you make sure you can sort of show up for people on a day-to-day basis?
Well, by the end of my day, my brain is fried. I'm exhausted by the end. But honestly, Andrew, I think I'm just a naturally very emotionally attuned person that doesn't take a lot out of me to be present with my clients. Like, I really enjoy getting deep and understanding them and being able to sit with them through all of that. But also, the point of coaching is to take action steps to get to where you want to be. And so if I feel like my clients are going a little too down far, that everything sucks and I'm miserable, it's my responsibility to get them back on track, right? So not to bypass their feelings, but to support them in understanding how to acknowledge their feelings while still taking a step further in the direction that they desire to go into.
And then my very final question, and thank you so much for what you've shared today, is do you have a vision for what the future looks like for you? What do you feel the next few years are going to feel like and look like for Jocelyn?
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to stay in Mexico for maybe a year or two more. And then I just see myself traveling the world. I'd love to do retreats eventually. I would love to write a book. I would love to do more courses to support people. But yeah, it's just building a larger community, helping more people, traveling the world, and eventually finding my person and then having sex with them and multiple other people and having just like so much fun. That's what I envision for myself.
What a fabulous ambition. Thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous, and I can't wait to listen back. So no, I really appreciate you.
Thank you. This was so much fun. I appreciate you, Andrew.